man. You wait here. Make sure nobody comes to the basement. Can do. Alright. I now bring this trial to order.
Acting as the prosecution, I bring this case before you against Jordan Lewis, the writer, producer of the Star Strike saga, which began in 1978, and has not ceased to this very day. He has profited in the estimate of over $3 billion from this franchise, from ticket sales, video sales, and merchandising. We charge Jordan Lewis with essentially 4 different major crimes. He has willfully committed plagiarism in concocting his sci-fi fantasy epics, constructing the entire story from start to finish completely out of pieces and parts of previously existing works, dressing it up by using talented artists, musicians, designers, actors, and selling it as what has been referred to as a work of genius to an unsuspecting public whom he later offended by suing them, lying to them, and even going so far as to revise the works to market it to a new audience. The second crime he is charged with is that this supposed work of epic science fiction is not science fiction at all, but pure fantasy, the conglomeration of fairy tales to be ridiculed for its lack of reality, believability, reasonable science, logic, or even intelligence. The third crime is that these films are essentially modern, authoritarian, fascist, and racist propaganda aimed at influencing an entire generation to bind into the fairy tales of Richard Wagner, Heinrich ideologies or new religion. Not to cash in on, but to pave the way for a nation of fascists whose values would be so similar to the Third Reich that one would think that Jordan Lewis was some sort of reincarnation of Guido von List. The fourth crime charge is that Jordan Lewis is essentially a bad director, the worst of all time, an Ed Wood Jr. with millions of dollars to play with, who cannot construct a decent plot nor understand continuity, and that he has assaulted his fans with his stupidity by adding elements to the saga which seemingly make no sense to be there, but to sell more toys. His greed, whether an influence on his poor cinematic abilities, to be connected with this crime exclusively, because it has become perfectly clear that he never set out ultimately to create a decent film series, but a manipulative fraud designed to build the public. Science fiction, mythology, cinema, propaganda, a money-making franchise. Which of these is the Star Strike saga? All of them? One of them? Ask Jordan Lewis, and you might get a different answer depending on what mood he's in. The main reason we're here today is that his space saga has had an undeniable influence. An influence on film and on its fans, on public consciousness, and yes, even on politics. Ronald Reagan famously turned to the saga for the basis of his strategic defense initiative, SDI, Space Weapons Platform, more famously violated the Soviet Union and the Evil Empire. Ultimately, however, he did set out to influence people with his films. I draw to your attention the following quote, which I will be referring to for its multifaceted relevance to all 4 cases. Quote, I wanted to make a kids' film that would strengthen contemporary mythology and introduce a kind of basic morality. Everyone's beginning to tell the kids, hey, this is right and this is wrong. You intended to use your films to influence the public. They have. Lewis will claim that it's not his responsibility to how these films influence the public, for the public has a mind of its own. Of course they do. You cite it time and time again when complaining about the public's criticisms of your new prequel trilogy. They have a mind of their own. Why should I care? You influence them. You promised them a story to wait for and unleashed a pile of steaming crap as your latest masterpiece. You can't deny the impact of these films on cinema, the public mind, the way movies are produced, the fast-paced content, as well as the epic story that seem to imply all sorts of allusions to reality. But when you come out with the latest installment and people begin to see it for what it really is, you complain. Accusing them of bias, having an expectation of wanting something more along the lines of what you sold them before, or perhaps wanting something that wasn't as flimsy and obviously bad as trying to reach the right property. set out to do. And you succeeded in winning the public over based on whatever circumstances, and later you ruined in their eyes what was nothing less than a perfect fantasy tale by adding all kinds of outlandish, ridiculous, superfluous, and inconsistent elements that they had two choices: buy it and hope that it gets better, or refuse it, throw it in the trash where it belongs, along with films like Triumph of the Will, War of the Worlds,
This is ridiculous!
Birth of a Nation, Catwoman, and Son-in-Law. Perhaps your gig was up, but you still raked it in. You still found the gullible. The biggest reason you don't deserve a penny of what you've earned is not that you've destroyed what you've created. You didn't create any of it. Not in the true sense of creation. You cut and pasted together essentially 12 hours from the works of previously existent stories, characters, scenes, plots, even names and designs. You have taken original material and fashioned it into your saga. You will claim that all stories are essentially the same, fairy tales out of our collective unconscious, and so on and so forth. But believe me, I will get to Joseph Campbell and Wagner and Heinrich Himmler, but let's examine some evidence.
I quote Richard Bottom, Jordan Lewis's title. Such a career as mine must never cheat young. He sees that he acts and undertakings he deems to be right, whereas at bottom they are quite native. Who marks the repugnance but only when the song is finished, that all is struck.
I present to you the case that you, Jordan Lewis, did more than make a fairy tale in space. You basically used this fairy tale mythology excuse to explain why you ripped off Lord of the Rings, which I'll get back to later. And numerous other stories dressed up as science fiction movies and books blended with other sources and made a too long commercial for public consumption of the vast merchandising empire known as the Lewis film. I will show that these films are not only not science fiction movies, I will show that they're barely movies at all, and completely unoriginal. I will show how fake they are. Fake not in the sense of unrealistic, necessarily, but in the sense of the word counterfeit, in the sense of phony. These films are practically entirely plagiarized from start to finish, and the only original elements in them were made by artists, musicians, and actors who worked on the film were practically no director. Did you know that there are over 100 uncredited actors in Star Strike? This is no surprise. George Lewis takes credit for everything in these movies, in every interview he has ever done. It is always, I created, I invented, my vision, my epic, my story, my movie.